When a loved one goes missing, the biggest fear is that they won't be found alive. And with the biggest mysteries surrounding people who disappeared or passed away in unexplained circumstances, it's easy to see why. But many missing people are eventually found alive, even after the most difficult of circumstances. Number 5. Angela Hernandez lived in Oregon, but was traveling down to Southern California to see her family. Once there, she and her sister planned to reveal Angela would be moving back to California. The two sisters text one another several times a day during the trip, as Angela kept her sister Isabel informed about where she was and when she expected to arrive at certain stop points. On July 5th, 2018, Angela texted Isabel to say she had arrived at Half Moon Bay and she was going to sleep in her car. The following morning, she let Isabel know she was about to hit the road again, and let her sister know when she was expected to be in Lancaster that evening. But Angela would never make it there. By the time Angela's expected arrival time came, Isabel was already worried. She hadn't been getting any responses from her sister since that morning, which wasn't like her. When Angela didn't arrive in Lancaster, Isabel contacted police. Cameras and cell phone pings indicated Angela had been driving south on Highway 1 and made it into Monterey County before she vanished. Police sent search and rescue teams along the stretch of road where Angela was last seen. It ran along some steep cliffs in some areas, and there was a fear she may have gone over the edge, seeing as her car was also missing. But volunteers found no signs of any broken railings that would have indicated someone had crashed through them. Helicopters were sent to search the coast from the air, but they also found no signs of a crash. It was as if Angela had vanished into thin air. 7 days after the crash, a couple came across an unusual sight at Big Sur. Chelsea and Chad Moore were surfers, but as the waves weren't great that day, they decided to go fishing instead. They climbed down a treacherous path to the isolated beach at the bottom of Big Sur Cliff. There, they found a completely wrecked Jeep. The Jeep had obviously rolled over several times as it plummeted down the cliff. Its roof had been torn off, and the driver was nowhere to be found. The Moores weren't aware of any missing persons cases at the time, but they took the license plate from the vehicle so they could report it to police. They continued down the beach to find a safer path back up to the road. It was as they rounded the corner that they came across Angela. Angela had been traveling without issue along the highway when a small animal darted in front of her car and she swerved to avoid it. Miraculously, she survived the crash, though she had suffered seriously and hadn't been able to get back to the road. She tried to call for help, but the cliff had been too steep for anyone to see her. She used the hose from her radiator to collect water from moss, which she used to keep hydrated. Chelsea Moore went to get help, and Angela was finally reunited with her family. Number 4. Timothy Carney was 25 years old when he went missing in September of 2004. For years before his disappearance, he'd been part of a religious organization which had been described by his family as cult-like. They feared his disappearance was due to the church. It was a high-profile case, and Timothy's information was posted on billboards in the hopes that someone would recognize him. He was even featured on the TV show Disappeared, but nothing seemed to help. Timothy was living in a flat owned by the church at the time of his disappearance. His flatmate, who was also a member of the church, said he last saw Timothy at about 5 a.m. when he left the house as usual. Timothy's usual routine would have been a prayer meeting held a few hours later, then the short drive to the New Jersey Department of Labor where he worked. However, for some reason, Timothy missed the prayer meeting that day, and at about 8:20 a.m., he called his boss to say he would be late to work due to the weather. He never showed up for work, and the mystery began. Timothy was reported missing when he didn't return home later that day. A few days later, his car was found abandoned at a Newark construction site. 4 days after he was last seen, CCTV outside a bank spotted Timothy withdrawing money from his account. It would turn out $1,000 was withdrawn, leaving only $100 untouched in his account. It was the last time anybody saw him. In the years that followed, the possible involvement of a cult caught the public's attention. According to one former member of the Gospel Outreach Church, Timothy had wanted to leave some years before his disappearance, but was convinced to stay. He was considered a weak brother because he was quiet and he missed his family. Visiting family outside the church was discouraged, but Timothy would sneak away to visit his parents and sister. For its part, the Gospel Outreach Church claimed its detractors knew where Timothy was, and they were hiding him. The real reason behind Timothy's disappearance remains a mystery, but almost exactly 7 years later, police announced they had located him. Timothy did not want to contact his family, and his right to privacy means we have no idea where he is, only that he's safe and in good health. Timothy himself hasn't come forward to give any explanation, but some sources have claimed that he said his disappearance was nothing to do with the church, and he just wanted to get away from his family. Number 3. When Arthur Jones disappeared in May of 1979, his wife feared the worst. It had been a troubling year for the Chicago broker. He had recently lost his job at the Board of Trade as a commodities trader after a trading mistake. He was also in significant gambling debt and had forged his wife's signature to get a second mortgage to try to pay off the debt. His wife and authorities suspected his disappearance was mob-related. Either he'd met with foul play due to the money he owed, or he had run to try to escape them. With little evidence to say otherwise, Jones was declared legally deceased later that same year, and his wife and 3 children tried to move on with their lives. It wasn't for 3 decades that the truth would be revealed. It was in Arizona in the mid-1990s when a 34-year-old man named Clifton Goodenough ran into problems with the IRS. He was an Army veteran who now worked as a nurse with the Phoenix Veteran Affairs healthcare system, but the government believed he was earning money in Las Vegas. It wouldn't be a one-off mistake, and year after year, Clifton was asked to pay taxes on thousands of dollars earned in Nevada by someone using his Social Security number. Clifton tried numerous channels to try to get the issue resolved, and was eventually given a new temporary Social Security number. In 2009, Clifton learned that his Social Security number was being used by a man in his 70s that called himself Joseph Sandelli. His wife found a man by the name living in Nevada in the phone book. Clifton expected Sandelli to be angry at being accused of stealing someone's identity, but the man on the phone just said there had been a mistake and he would change his own number. Clifton found this strange, given Sandelli was supposedly only a few years away from retirement. He eventually got his state senator involved, and finally authorities in Nevada closed in on Sandelli. After he was arrested, Sandelli admitted to being the missing Arthur Jones. He'd gone to Florida after disappearing, living there for a year, before moving to California and eventually Nevada. For the past 2 decades, he'd worked as a bookie and had a good life for himself in Las Vegas. He hadn't been in contact with any of his friends and family from his old life, and had a new long-term partner in Nevada. He was found guilty of identity theft and ordered to pay back the money to Clifton and the IRS. Number 2. Tammy Miller had always been told her mother hadn't been able to cope with the stress of motherhood, and after giving Tammy and her sisters to her mother-in-law, disappeared without a trace. It was a story Tammy, who had just been 2 at the time, had accepted. As an adult, she had little hope of her mother, Lula Ann Gillespie Miller, ever being found alive, though her grandmother had always kept the porch light on in case Lula ever came home. But when Tammy was 41, she decided to do an internet search of her mother's name, and discovered Lula's life had been much more complicated. In 1969, 2 years before Tammy was born, Lula's husband passed away in a car accident. Lula had a brief affair with a married man, Tammy's biological father, but it wasn't a stable relationship. After her youngest child was born, Lula gave custody of her 4 children to her husband's mother. She thought she was too young to be a single parent and couldn't cope, but she remained in contact with them. That was until 1974. Lula was attacked by 4 men and thrown over a bridge into the river. She survived the attack and managed to make it back home. A police statement was made but never filed, and the next day, Lula had vanished. The only contact she had with her family from this point onwards was a postcard from Richmond, Indiana. On discovering this, Tammy searched through the Doe Network, a database of unidentified individuals, hoping to find closure. There was one Doe whose body had been found in a sewer in Richmond around the same time the postcard was sent. She had been buried since, but police called for the body to be exhumed and DNA tested. Before the police could even get the results, they had another lead. A woman matching Lula's description had been living in Tennessee in the 1980s. She had since moved to Texas, but she could be tracked down. In 2014, Texas officers knocked on her door. The woman couldn't believe anyone was looking for her, but she eventually admitted to being Lula Gillespie Miller. Lula had been living under an assumed name. What she'd been doing for the past 40 years is a mystery. She hadn't committed any crimes and has remained private. She gave a phone number for her daughter to contact her with, but after a brief phone call, Tammy Miller said she wouldn't be contacting her mother again. Number 1. Matthew Green was 24 years old when he disappeared from Kent, England in 2010. Matthew had been a happy, outgoing teenager, but things took a turn when he was 17, in part due to a run-in with police when he was falsely accused of a crime. He became reserved, would keep away from family members, and fell into the wrong crowds. Despite this, when he had a psychotic break at age 24, his parents said it was completely out of the blue. He had a stay in a hospital and seemed to have recovered. He got a job as a roofer and seemed much happier. Things were normal for about 2 years. Then one Friday night in April of 2010, he told his parents he was going to London to go for some drinks with a friend. They expected him home Sunday night, but there was still no sign of him, but they weren't too concerned. It seemed likely he had had one too many drinks and would be making his way back in the morning. It was only when he didn't show up for work that they thought something might be wrong, and 2 days later they contacted police. There was little progress made in the investigation. At one point, a body was found near where Matthew's parents lived, and police judged that the person had probably passed away around the same time Matthew went missing. However, it was confirmed this wasn't him, and Matthew's parents continued their search, convinced he was still alive. In May of 2016, police officers knocked on their door to say they had news about Matthew. Matthew had been arrested in Spain. He'd been wanted for some petty thefts and was found behaving erratically. But Matthew's parents were disappointed and angry to find out he didn't want to speak with them. Despite this, they continued to push for information, even attempting to hire a private investigator. They then discovered Matthew had been admitted to a secure health facility and was suffering with mental health problems. His parents flew to Spain, but he still didn't want to see him. They eventually managed to get him transferred to an English hospital, where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. As Matthew received the mental health support he needed, he allowed his parents to visit, and in 2017, joined them for Christmas, giving a happy ending that at one point his parents thought would never come. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.